On November 19, NASA held a press conference in Greenbelt, Maryland, to officially release images of an interstellar object that has been the subject of intense controversy over the past few months, 3I Atlas. They had been legally unable to share these images for 6 weeks due to the infamous government shutdown, and conspiracy theories were circulating about what they were hiding. The room was packed with reporters, scientists, and cameras from around the world. As NASA Deputy Administrator Nicola Fox took the podium, the first thing she said was, "We certainly haven't seen anything that would lead us to believe it's anything other than a comet." This was considered certain case closed. 3I Atlas was just a comet from another star system. Unusual. Yes, but perfectly natural. The Deputy Administrator of NASA even said that the object was a comet. It looked and acted like a comet. All the evidence pointed to it being a comet. Just a few hours later, Harvard professor Avi Loeb went on News Nation and said something that made a lot of people uncomfortable. He said that NASA really wasn't revealing anything new, that they were just repeating what we already knew. And then he said something even more interesting, that any of his colleagues who were so sure it was a comet weren't particularly curious or imaginative about nature. Because the thing is, what's been happening with this object over the past few months isn't just weird, it's weird in a very specific way, creating two completely different interpretations of the same data. One group sees absolute evidence of a natural comet. The other group sees patterns that seem too convenient to be natural. And the closer you look at the evidence, the harder it is to tell which group is right. Stay tuned, because what happens next will blow your mind. If you are fascinated by the mystery of 3I Atlas and want to see more amazing cosmic stories, hit that like button and let the universe know you are watching. Every click helps keep the quest for the unknown alive. Comment below and let me know where you are watching this from. I want to see what corners of the world are witnessing this with me. To understand why the scientific community is still arguing about this mysterious object, even after NASA's big announcement, we need to go back to July. On July 1, the Atlas robotic telescope in Chile detected an object moving through space that was immediately considered unusual. Analysis showed that it was moving on a hyperbolic trajectory with a velocity high enough to rule out its solar system origin, and almost certainly came from a distant star. This caught the attention of astronomers, although not entirely unprecedented, because before 3I Atlas, humanity had encountered two interstellar visitors, 2017s. Oumuamua, which remained controversial due to its strange behavior, and was suspected to be artificial, and 2019's comet Borisov, which is more natural. The appearance of 3I Atlas thus became the third recorded interstellar object passing through the solar system. But just a few days later, when an astronomer calculated the object's orbit, he noticed a detail that surprised him. Based on its speed and direction of travel, the time this object entered the solar system was estimated to be about 8,000 years ago. This seemingly meaningless number coincided surprisingly with a period when humans began to form writing, starting to record and archive history. The scientists described this coincidence as strange, to the point of suspicion, as if the object had appeared at the exact time when human civilization was capable of recognizing its visit to him. This was like a mysterious first law that current science cannot explain. From there, Harvard professor Avi Loeb, who once controversially suggested that Oumuamua might be an extraterrestrial technology, began studying 3I Atlas in unusual detail. he immediately discovered 4 anomalies that left many scientists baffled. The first anomaly was in its almost implausible orbit. 3, Atlas was tilted only about 5 degrees relative to the plane of the planets. In 3-dimensional space, an interstellar object could have come from any direction, so the probability of it being so nearly aligned with the plane of the planets is as low as throwing a dart from the other side of the Earth and hitting the bullseye. The second anomaly emerged on the approach. 3, Atlas passed by Mars, Venus, and Earth in that order of rocky planets, each time close enough for detailed observations, but without causing any danger, suggesting a deliberate survey mission. The third anomaly involved chemical composition. Initially, there was no sign of water, but subsequent radio and infrared observations recorded significant amounts of water and CO2 in ratios far different from natural comets. The fourth anomaly stemmed from size based on brightness. The object was only 2 to 5 16 kilometers doi, 2 to 3, 5 miles wide, far smaller than the original estimate of 22. 5 kilometers, pais presece, 4 miles, but still large enough to be easily recognized, about the length of Manhattan Island. From these data, Loeb concludes that perhaps we should consider the possibility that 3I Atlas is not a natural comet, but an artificial structure. According to him, if a civilization wanted to send a probe through the solar system to observe the planets, 3, Atlas's orbit would be almost perfect. His description makes the object look like an incredibly strange comet, or an artificial structure deliberately mimicking natural behavior. Much of the scientific community quickly dismissed Loeb's bold claim, saying he was being hasty and that all humanity needed was more data. But then came a new development that turned the skepticism into concern. As 3, Atlas approached the sun, astronomers realized it would reach perigee on October 29. During the crucial 3 weeks of this phase, the Earth would be facing the sun, completely denying us the ability to observe the object's most intense activity. From here, the sequence of events begins to get strange. Mars is positioned almost perfectly to observe the entire process, while multiple spacecraft are orbiting the red planet, all equipped with high-resolution cameras. From a scientific perspective, this seems like a well-orchestrated scenario, as if 3, Atlas knew that even if Earth couldn't track it, humanity would still be watching through mechanical eyes placed around Mars. The object chose an orbit that obscured its perigee from Earth, but not from instruments around Mars, a perfect strategy if one wanted to be observed without being too obtrusive. On October 2, NASA's MRO spacecraft adjusted its super-resolution camera and took the closest images ever recorded of 3. Atlas coming just 19 million miles away. Extremely close for an interstellar object. China's Tianwen-1 spacecraft also took images, and by protocol, the data should have been sent back to Earth and released. But then things got confusing. Around the same time, the US government shut down. When that happened, NASA was forced to stop releasing data and halt most communications. This meant that the only agency with the sharpest images of the mysterious object couldn't share any information with the public. The freeze lasted until November 12, covering the entire crucial observing period. This incredible coincidence immediately raised the question, was this just a random event or a link in a chain of events with hidden implications amid growing controversy? Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna sent a public letter asking NASA for an explanation, asserting that the public had a right to know what the images contain, but NASA remained legally bound and could not respond. Meanwhile, amateur astronomers around the world continue to observe 3I Atlas with smaller telescopes and continue to report a series of inexplicable behaviors. It all adds up to a disturbing pattern. Just when humanity is able to observe the object most clearly, the law has inadvertently slammed the door on information. The rest is just a long silence and big unanswered questions. And so, on October 29, 3I Atlas reached perihelion, the closest it had ever been to the sun. Almost immediately, amateur astronomers around the world reported a startling phenomenon. The object's brightness skyrocketed by more than 100 times, far exceeding any other comet ever recorded. Some images showed it breaking into pieces. One person counted as many as 16 separate pieces. For the first few hours, it looked as if the object had exploded, but subsequent observations showed it remained intact, not disintegrating at all. This created a strange paradox. It somehow exploded and didn't explode at the same time. This strange phenomenon was not the end. Shortly after the brightness spike, another development further puzzled researchers. 3I Atlas developed a reverse tail pointing toward the sun. Instead of being blown away like all normal comets, according to established laws of physics, comet tails are always pushed away from the sun by the solar wind. But 3I Atlas had two tails, and one of them appeared to be pointing directly at the sun, completely defying all standard physical models. Astrophysicists call this phenomenon inconsistent with classical comet dynamics, a term used to describe behavior that current theories cannot explain. Avi Loeb calculates that if 3I Atlas were indeed a natural comet, it would have to lose 13% of its mass in just a few days to produce this level of turbulence and outgassing, the equivalent of a controlled explosion by all thermodynamic models that would have resulted in the complete disintegration of the comet. Yet again, 3I Atlas survived, seemingly defying the limits of known physics. While the scientific community was still trying to make sense of what had just happened, something else happened a few days earlier. On October 24, a radio telescope in South Africa detected radio emissions from 3I Atlas. The news spread quickly, and many people hastily dismissed it as an alien intelligence signal. Experts later reassured the public that it was simply hydroxyl radiation, a natural signal that occurs when water molecules are broken down by sunlight. But that reassurance raised another, more troubling question. If the hydroxyl signal was present, it meant the object contained water. But why did 3I Atlas only begin to exhibit the characteristics of a comet after it had already undergone a series of behaviors that were completely unnatural for a natural comet? A new pattern emerged. The object only began behaving like a normal comet after it had survived phenomena that were normally inexplicable. It went through a series of events that would have destroyed any other comet and then calmly resumed its behavior. As if nothing strange had happened, by November 19, when the U.S. government officially reopened, NASA was finally able to release what it had observed during the shutdown. A major press conference was held, accompanied by images from Mars orbit and several ground-based telescopes. But despite the weeks-long wait, what was shown was a faint point of light, surrounded by a hazy haze, no details, no structure, no shape, no information that could shed light on the mystery. After all the silence, the expectations, the rumors, and the questions, the public was left with an image that was almost worthless. NASA officials were adamant that 3I Atlas was just a comet, that the story should end there, and that no further theories beyond the natural world were needed. They argued that any strange behavior could be explained by familiar physics. The sunward tail was a rare perspective effect. The 100-fold increase in brightness was a normal feature of comets approaching the sun. To NASA, it was all normal. Yet for many observers who have followed the events of 3I Atlas, that definition of normal seems to make the story all the more unbelievable. If you like, I can continue the next section, going into the post-perihelion phase, the reaction of the scientific community, public opinion, and the increasingly widespread hypotheses. But then NASA itself, despite its stated stance, inadvertently admitted details that undermine its explanation. In the press conference, it acknowledged that 3I Atlas had an unusually high carbon dioxide to water ratio, a value never before recorded in any comet. Additionally, orbital analysis suggested the object originated in the galactic disk, a vast region of the Milky Way, where stars and other objects can exist for billions of years. This meant 3I Atlas could be older than the solar system. And most worryingly, NASA could offer no convincing explanation for how the object survived what looked like a massive fragmentation at perihelion. Each answer, rather than solving the problem, seemed to open up new ones. Just hours after the press conference ended, Avi Loeb posted a powerful rebuttal on his personal blog, accusing NASA of misleading the public, a charge rarely heard in mainstream science. Loeb began with Sherlock Holmes' famous quote, "Nothing is more deceptive than an obvious truth," as a warning that NASA's confidence in the natural comet hypothesis may be obscuring what it does not understand. According to Loeb, NASA is simply repeating the official mantra that 3I Atlas is a normal comet. The point, he says, is not so much forcing the phenomenon to fit a familiar model, but what that model can account for the bizarre behaviors, the dynamical paradoxes, and the huge gaps in our current understanding. Not content with criticism, Loeb went on to make a stunning claim. He said he had compiled dozens of unusual phenomena at 3I Atlas that NASA had yet to explain. When these phenomena were put together like puzzle pieces, a disturbing picture emerged, one that he said cannot be ignored because it is inconvenient. The first point Loeb emphasized was related to orbit the likelihood of an interstellar object passing by Mars, then Venus, then Earth, in that order of rocky planets, and appearing at a time when humans were able to observe it, he said, was absurdly low. Loeb cited his calculations as putting the probability at about 1 in 100,000. A ratio that he said Mother Nature rarely favors NASA with. Loeb then turns to the jets observed just after perihelion. Based on the data, he describes them as highly collimated jets, meaning that the material is ejected in narrow, concentrated columns, both toward and away from the sun. If this were a natural phenomenon, a comet would have to eject material in jets that extend 1,000 kilometers toward the sun, and more than 8 million kilometers in the opposite direction, and maintain this configuration for months. But natural comets typically do not produce such powerful, sustained jets. Loeb bluntly calls this behavior incompatible with classical cometary physics. In his commentary, Loeb criticizes the excessive caution of many scientists insisting that the scientific community should remain humble about new phenomena rather than trying to fit them into familiar theories. He argues that anomalies are golden opportunities to expand knowledge, not things to be minimized or avoided. Loeb's article ends with a challenging remark. Bureaucrats and unimaginative minds want us to believe in what is familiar, but the rest of us know that the most exciting things are still ahead. While Loeb stirred up new controversy, NASA revealed another notable detail. More spacecraft were involved in observing 3I Atlas than the public had previously known. It wasn't just the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter MRO that captured images. MAVEN also collected data in ultraviolet wavelengths. On the surface of Mars, Perseverance took images from the ground. In addition, multiple solar probes, like stereo, and the punch system recorded data during perihelion. Anyone who operates a telescope wants to point it at 3I Atlas, says NASA's Sean Donegal-Goldman. Yet, despite the vast network of spacecraft and the vast amount of data collected, what NASA shows the public is a faint white blob floating in the blackness of space. Amit Kshatriya describes the images as nothing more than a hazy white sphere with almost no detail. This is all the more puzzling when considering that these instruments have previously captured sharp structures on comets, asteroids, and even more subtle phenomena. Avi Loeb was quick to emphasize this point, saying the new images don't add much to the Hubble and James Webb data from last summer. The lack of detail in the publicly available data has fueled speculation that NASA may be holding back higher resolution images, or at least not ready to release them, for fear of confusing the public. If you want, I can write the next part, the world's reaction, new theories emerging, independent scientists getting involved, and what happens when 3I Atlas starts leaving the solar system. Personally, I can only share what I have learned, and at this point, I am not sure what conclusions to draw. What is happening around 3I Atlas is too difficult to explain definitively. If something big is really going on, and NASA is forced to keep it under wraps to avoid panic, it is understandable that they are releasing very few images and withholding more detailed data. However, we have absolutely no evidence for that scenario. Everything is currently speculation in the information vacuum. On the other hand, if 3I Atlas is just a natural comet with some unusual features, but still within the limits of physics, then there's probably nothing to worry about. As of November 25, we're less than a month away from its closest approach to Earth on December 19, when it will be about 170 million miles away from Earth, far enough away to be safe. After that, it will leave the solar system forever, closing the door to direct study. The truth is, though, we still don't know what 3I Atlas really is. Avi Loeb goes on to argue that it could be artificial in nature. If a civilization wanted to send an interstellar probe but still maintain plausible deniability, he argues, then 3I Atlas's orbit, behavior, and timing all fit together in a suspiciously similar way, detectable but not too noticeable, seemingly natural, but constantly exhibiting the most inexplicable behavior at precisely the times when Earth cannot observe it. Meanwhile, NASA and the majority of scientists remain adamant that this is just a comet, no matter how strange it is. According to them, any coincidence is just a product of people searching for meaning in incomplete data. We are thus stuck between two possibilities: a natural comet with some unusual properties, or an object whose nature may well defy current scientific predictions, given the paucity of data, the paradoxical behavior, and the myriad unanswered questions, our definitive conclusion remains elusive. The strangest thing is that the more data we get, the more mysterious it becomes. Every new piece of information only adds to the fog, as if we know enough to suspect, but not enough to understand. It could all be the biggest coincidence ever recorded in astronomy. Or it could be more than just a coincidence. The most worrying scenario is not that we find alien technology, but that we have enough evidence to suspect, but not to confirm, at least until December 19. At present, all the public has are fragmentary and incomplete pieces of information. 3. Atlas remains a mystery to modern science, and it may be a long time before we have an answer. If you love mysterious science, stories like this, please like and subscribe to follow the next content. See you in the next video.